Sadie started yelling at me. "If you leave, don't come back." She'd found me in the back room of the house snorting a line of Adderall. I'd been clean for the better part of 6 months, but between the stress at work and her nagging, I needed to pick me up. It's a pathetic excuse, sure. Life is different when you're addicted to speed. When you're up, the world moves fluidly around you. When you're sober, everything takes forever. 6 months of sobriety came to an end with 60 milligrams up my nose and a girlfriend that had no desire to see me again. I packed my bag and headed out the door. My shift at Circle K started in 30 minutes. It wasn't the first time I'd gone to work tweaking, but it was the first time in months. I clocked in and put my vest and name tag on as the second shift guy clocked out and left. I went through the motions of counting my drawer and doing inventory on the cigarettes. I had 8 hours to kill at a dead-end job until I had to find somewhere else to sleep. A customer came in around midnight and lingered around the energy drink cooler for about 5 minutes before opting for a Snapple and cashing out with a pack of Marlboro Lights. After that, it was pretty dead. After sweeping and mopping the floor and restocking the coolers, I made it a point to pop into the back room and put 3 more pills up my nose, 150 milligrams in my system at that point, and 5 out of the 10 pills I'd scored gone. With nothing to do in the store, I stepped outside for a smoke. A brown 4-door car pulled up to the gas pump, but no one got out of it. I sat there on the trash can smoking a cigarette as I watched the car. The headlights illuminated the parking lot, with the fog light glowing blue as the driver finally honked the horn. I stood up and walked inside to authorize the pump, and walk out to the window. There was a sign on the pump that read, "Handicapped? Honk for assistance." As I approached the pump, I got a queasy feeling in my stomach. The man in the car rolled down the window and handed me a $50 bill asking for a fill-up. He popped the gas latch on the gas cap, and I started pumping the gas as I noticed the car was shaking. A moment later, I heard a muffled scream come from the trunk of the car. Just as I turned to head back inside, the driver opened his door and climbed out the front seat to reveal that he stood just over 7 foot tall and was as big around as a door frame. His massive hand balled into a fist and came at me faster than I would have liked. I was barely able to duck out of the way when a second fist connected with my right shoulder and damn near lifted me off the ground. I was knocked back and the man charged at me. I had just enough presence of mind to jump off the side as he charged past me. I tried to run for the store, but he closed the distance between us and put one of his massive hands on my shoulder and tossed me back towards his car. I landed on the hood. 2 massive hands descended on my throat and started choking me out as I reached into my pocket and pulled out my keys. The world around me was going dark as I balled up my fist with the keys between my fingers and raked them across his face as fast as I could. I pulled back for another punch and started seeing stars, but followed through to gouge him in the eye as he pulled his hands back to his face, and I rolled off the hood coughing. The man climbed back into the car and turned over the engine while the fuel nozzle was still in his tank. A moment later, he sped off, only to rip the hose off the pump. I ran over and hit the emergency fuel stop as his headlights disappeared into the distance. I called my manager and then I called the police. The manager arrived before the police did, which wasn't saying much. Police response time on 3rd shift had been terrible for a while. We got robbed one night and the police didn't show up for 30 minutes. My manager didn't laugh when I suggested we stock fresh donuts. Police arrived and took a statement. I was sent home as per protocol, but with no home to go back to. I went over to my car, only to find I had bent my car key, gouging into the man's face. I didn't have enough money to call a locksmith, and I didn't want to stay at the gas station. I took off on foot. I was about a mile down the road when I saw a car blow past me, only to turn around and come careening right at me. All I could see was headlights, but as the car got closer, I dove off into the sidewalk as it blew past me and hit a lamppost. I stumbled to my feet, only for the man in the driver's seat to open the door and climb out. The massive man stumbled towards me as I looked around me for anywhere to hide. The smoke coming from his engine came out from under the crumpled hood, and in the light of the street lamp, he had an almost red glow about him as he gained his footing and came barreling at me full force. I sidestepped him, just in time to miss being tackled to the ground by the hulk of a man. He spun around on his heel and came at me. I ran for the car. I didn't look back. I ran towards the car and jumped up to dive over the hood of the car as I felt the car shake on its wheels as he collided with the vehicle. Another car just drove past as he climbed up on the car and let out a grunt as he dived toward me. I jumped out of the way and we hit the ground with his hands outstretched as I ran back towards the car. My mind rushed to the sounds from the trunk and I popped it hoping it would distract him when I heard the once muffled scream in full force. The man was still stumbling to his feet when I pulled the box cutter from my vest and cut the tape on the woman's wrist and ankles only for the man to grab me and throw me to the ground. Fist after heavy fist, pounding me in the face, and blood flowed from a cut on my brow into my eyes, blinding me. I tried to bring my hands up to my face, but his massive fist simply hit my forearms and slammed them into my face as I tried to squirm out from under him. My head was throbbing, and I was convinced I was about to die when I heard a gurgling sound followed by the sensation of warm liquid showering down on me. I squirmed out from under him and wiped the blood from my eyes to see that the woman had used my box cutter to slit the man's throat. My body ached from the beating, and I'm convinced the only reason I remained conscious was the Adderall I put up my nose. The woman and I sat on the trunk of the car as I phoned the police. In the 15 minutes it took them to respond, we talked. She said her name was Ashley. Then she said, "So I'm standing there trying to get into my car, when that big motherfucker covers my mouth and jerks the keys from my hands and pops the trunk with the remote. Next thing I know, I'm taped up and he's driving around in my car, listening to loud country music. I heard a fight at one point, and then a couple of hours later, you let me out. Thank you, by the way. You probably saved my life." I laughed and said, "Yeah, I think we're even. I feel like I got hit by a truck. You did save my life." She smiled, and I smiled. There was an awkward silence that she filled by planting a kiss on my cheek. My face was still sore from being used as a human punching bag, and I winced in pain as her lips made contact with my cheek. The police arrived, and we both gave our statements as the EMTs patched us up. Her car was towed, and the cop offered us a ride home. She invited me up to her place, and I jumped at the opportunity to sleep indoors. After an hour or so of desperate sex, we both passed out. I woke to coffee and eggs as she walked around the apartment in my shirt. I popped 2 pills with my coffee, and she curled up next to me in bed as I thumbed through 15 angry text messages from Sadie about how I needed to come get my shit. I laughed and put the phone on the nightstand before rolling over for a mid-afternoon snuggle marathon, boning with a girl who seemed otherwise insatiable. I got dressed and got ready to head for work when she said, "I saw those texts. You're welcome to stay here for a while." I smiled and said, "I'll be back in the morning. Try not to get kidnapped." She threw a pillow at me and smiled as she said, "Yeah, try not to get beaten to death by a giant." Yeah, life is weird like that. Hey guys, thanks for listening. This was my first shot at a longer story, and I'd like to do more of them. I've already gotten a few suggestions on how to tune some of the vocal narration, but if you have any others, don't hesitate to drop them below. Alright, thanks again guys, I'll see you in the next one.